Welcome back to Module 2. This is XAML for Windows 10. I'm Jerry. This is Darren. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Jerry.
And we are talking about items, controls. That's the repeater inside XAML. We just went through the fundamentals and talked about some of the basics to get it all to work, including semantic zoom. And let's see here. There's our friend. Yeah. You like that?
He likes that? Just shows any old monkey can present this stuff. That's what he said.
Yeah, that's terrific. And in this module, Module 2, this is only a 2-module course, we'll be talking about templates.
Templates, indeed.
Data templates, item templates, panel templates. We have so many templates to talk about.
Yep.
Just hold on because we've got a lot.
You nearly said monkeys, didn't you?
And monkey templates. Yes, I guess.
So we've got some recommended resources where you can go out to MSDN and look up data template, and you can see a lot of the information around that. Excuse me. And so let's dive into looking at templates. So we're going to be looking at a number of different types of templates. We're going to look at ItemsPanelTemplate. Then we're going to...
That's like a panel, like another module we have.
That is very similar to this.
All about panels.
And then we're going to look into exactly what a data template is and some examples of leveraging data templates. And then we're going to jump and have a look at template selectors.
Yeah, that'll be pretty exciting. It's cooler than it might sound.
It is.
Yeah.
OK, ItemsPanelTemplate. So the name is pretty well describes what's going on here.
It's the template for the panel that holds the items. Just read it backwards and you're good to go.
Exactly. One of the things, obviously, it makes sense that you're probably going to use a panel in the ItemsPanelTemplate.
Yeah, typically is for sure. I mean, the likelihood of not doing it that way is so unusual.
The main thing here is it's actually not constrained so that it doesn't have to be a panel-derived class.
Right.
But the reality is, in most cases, why would you not use it?
Right. So that means things like a stack panel. That means things like a wrap grid, things like a grid, even, you could put in there.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
But you couldn't put ellipse in there.
You could not put in, well, you could, but it wouldn't do anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
But I guess it has to have a child.
It does, yeah. You can't put ellipse.
Yeah, you cannot put in an ellipse. Yeah.
Also, if you are using it in a group style panel,
right,
then it cannot be virtualizing. So we just touched on group styles, actually, in the previous module where we looked at collection view source, and we used group style right then.
Yes, that's right.
As part of the...
Group style can be one of the neatest things you can do to your data, especially when you have a lot of data. And then, interesting, there's a little conflict. As soon as you have a lot of data, you might think about virtualization. So now you've got to see what the trade-off is between grouping it and virtualizing it. What is virtualization? Maybe I should cover that real quick. Do you mind?
No, by all means.
There's two types of virtualization, both visual virtualization and data virtualization. So you get visual virtualization pretty much for free. What that means is items aren't rendered if they're off screen, so you don't have to have the cost of them being rendered. The platform gives you that for free. However, if you have 1 million records in your list, you still have to deal with 1 million records. And so data virtualization basically says only load the first 100 and then load the next 100 based on some sort of activity. Maybe you scroll into a certain position. Maybe you actually click a button. Could be all kinds of things. That's data virtualization, so you never have your full 1 million records up in memory.
Seems like a great idea for efficiency.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, especially with 1 million records. If you try to show 1 million records on your phone app, you've got it all wrong.
And the reality is there's a lot to virtualization, and there's a lot to some of the data sources that you can leverage with virtualization in terms of being able to page data in and so on and so forth. So that's something we're going to cover in more detail in a later course.
Okay. Yeah,
good.
It's a very advanced topic.
Absolutely. So let's come back to ItemsPanelTemplate, and let's look at how we can actually set a value in there. So in this particular scenario, we're going to declare it in line within our list view. So list view is the major element. We can see that here. We also have inside ItemsControl.ItemsPanel. So this is interesting because ItemsPanel comes from ItemsControl, and list view inherits from ItemsControl, which is why this is available to us. We then define ItemsPanelTemplate, which is a separate class, and not to be confused with DataTemplate, is it actually something discrete and different.
And it's meant for a panel.
Exactly. And inside there, we have happened to declare an items wrap grid. So we're using a list view, and so it's not common to see list views actually presenting things in a grid like this. But that just shows the power of this templating and the ability to drop in something very different.
As an aside, you could have chosen wrap grid instead of items wrap grid. The difference is items wrap grid is full of virtualization goodness.
Exactly.
So you're ready to virtualize already with George Lopez. Look at that.
Random data. It produces everything.
It produces. You did it.
Yes.
You finally.
That's
made
it.
Yeah.
George Lopez. I was shooting for War and Peace, but we got George Lopez. Oh, well. So
Okay.
that's one example. Here's an example of leveraging a resource to define an items panel template. So we've got a key horizontal wrap grid. We have the items wrap grid, again, declared orientation horizontal. And this time we're using items panel equals static resource horizontal wrap grid.
Okay, so this could be handy if the type of panel you're using is maybe set up in a special way and used maybe more than once.
Yes.
Okay, I get that. Orientation horizontal.
Yeah, maybe it's a signature presentation style.
We love that.
There we do. Okay, so some of the other interesting things is, obviously we can play around with our orientation in this particular scenario. So we can change our items wrap grid to wrap vertically.
Instead of horizontally. So two slides ago, you were going from left to right.
Yep.
Now you're going from top to bottom because now Juan is below George.
Exactly. And one of the primary reasons to show this is if we then wanted to move into using something like a stack panel, we can see the difference here. So now we get our linear list. And so we could use item stack panel as well in something like this, which again is prepared for virtualization.
Which, by the way, this is the default for a list view, is the virtualized stack panel, not the regular, but you wouldn't know the difference until you start growing it.
Absolutely. Now, one of the key things here is, in this scenario, I've switched the stack panel to be horizontal.
That looks great.
Not exactly an ideal presentation style, I agree, but one of the challenges often occurs with this is by default, you don't get the horizontal scrolling.
Oh, yeah.
And so the only way to bring this in is to switch on scrollViewer.horizontal scroll mode, easy for me to say, equals auto, and scrollViewer horizontal scroll bar visibility equals auto. I have to set both of those on before this. If I set on the scroll mode equals, or the scroll bar visibility equals auto, the scroll bar appears, but is not receptive to any interaction. I have to turn the horizontal scroll mode equals auto as well to make the scroll bar actually respond to interaction.
Very nice. So that's this unusual syntax, by the way, where scrollViewer.horizontal scroll mode is an attached property in the default namespace for XAML.
Yep.
And allows me to set it on a container or a parent object that flows down to all of its children, just in case you don't have access. In this case, you certainly don't have access to the scroll viewer, but it'll still apply it for you.
Yes. There's other ways of doing this as well through custom styles and so on and so forth, but this is an interesting syntax that was worthwhile showing. It's one of those edge cases that every now and again your head scratch and go, why is this not showing up?
Yeah, no, I like it. I could see doing that, honestly, on a phone when it's in landscape mode.
Yep.
Right? That's not too unusual. Yeah. All right.
Okay. So just for grins, there is the highlight for that.
Data templates. All right.
Templates.
This is where it all kind of hits the road. I like this part. Now, a data template, you might be asking yourself, what is it? A data template, in fact, if we could hearken back to other modules that we've done or other courses we've done.
Cast our mind back, all those minutes.
There was this idea of data, and then there's this, which is the model itself, right? It's just your C# class. And then on the other side is this idea of what it's supposed to look like, completely separated. And so we have our class. It doesn't know about the template that's going to render it and show it. And oddly enough, the template really doesn't know anything about the class either. Separate those two out. That's what we're talking about, the template side, the data template that will render up your record in some sort of way inside your UI. So we can apply this, and it will repeat inside the repeater for every record in it.
Certainly if we're using it as an item repeater.
Certainly.
So where are data templates used? So we use them within items controls, item template, which is the example you were just talking about. We also have content control, content template. Excuse me. That was one of the scenarios you were talking about earlier on where we had custom controls when we were building styles and presentations there. We have header template and footer template of various item control classes. So also items presenter has a header template and a footer template. We have the regular header and footer templates for rich edit and text boxes. So there's a lot of commonality here and a number of properties.
We have to change the title of this slide to where are templates used? Because not all of these are data templates, but they all are conceptually used identically.
They are actually all data templates.
Even the content template?
Yeah.
Even the header template?
Absolutely.
Well, let's
directly from MSDN documentation.
Let's leave the title as data template.
Sounds like a good plan. Okay.
Cut it out. Dang.
Keep quiet in the cheap seats, apparently.
You've been, exactly.
So let's talk about some specifics around these item templates.
Okay.
And without further ado, it's enough slides. Shall we jump and look at some code?
Yep. Let's open up Visual Studio Code.
Let's open up Visual Studio Code. Yeah, I think that would be a short trip to Disappointment City.
This stuff is hard.
I'm a doctor, not a physicist.
I'm leaving this up to you.
Okay, so I'm on my Visual Studio, and so I'm going to run this application, and it's going to show us a wonderful UI. And so what we have here is a list that is empty.
That is a terrific UI.
I know.
Now, I do want to point out that the usability of the scroll bar has kept it so that
It is pretty key.
it's adaptive.
It is very responsive. Now, the key thing here is we're showing an empty list.
Okay, so that is a list view.
That is a list view that's on our page, which is why we have a scroll bar and so on, but there is no content. Wouldn't it be great if there was some way that we could show that there is no content? So let's have a look at an approach we can take to doing that. Before I jump into that, here is our list view.
That's what we were just looking at.
That's what we're just looking at. It's inside a scroll viewer, and we have all of these templates being set, but there's nothing to show. So there's no crunchy goodness to display inside here. So let's come up and actually start to activate a couple of things. So if we look at our data template here, we have a very simple data template that we're using for our item template, but we have no data to display in there.
Okay.
So let's have a look at our header. And here's a nice little trick that is available to us. So let me uncomment this, and we can talk through this. So at the top here, we have what you would commonly do.
Now wait, this is the header template, meaning it's at the tip top of the list.
Tip top of the list.
Okay.
So this is what you would typically do in a header template, is you would define some item that you're going to show as the list.
Sure. Like customers.
We have a custom control here that we're going to use in a moment, a button. But here is our special little piece of code. So this is a border with a background red. That's visibility is tied to this custom converter, which we'll jump into in a moment. Here is an interesting binding syntax. What we have here is we're binding to the element name customer list, which just so happens to be this list view.
Okay.
We are bound to the item source count.
To a property of the item source.
Exactly. And so if we quickly look at the list view item source, we see that's bound to customers. So if I quickly jump into the code behind here, we can see that customers is right here, an observable collection of customer.
All right.
Okay, so that's our code behind. So what we're saying is the visibility of this border and its contents, which happens to be a text block that says no records loaded in a very subtle style, is going to be controlled by whether they're the count value of the item source. So let's
All right. So every time the value of count changes, so 0, 1, 2, 3,
this binding expression is going to be evaluated,
which
is somehow going to be changing the visibility
because of the converter, which is called visible when 0.
So if we take a quick look into our visible when 0 converter, we've implemented the iValue converter interface that tells us that we have to have a convert and convert back. While it tells us we have to have those, it doesn't tell us that we have to implement it. And common to a lot of converters that you create, there's no need to create the round trip.
97% of all converters don't do that.
Exactly. And 99.9% of statistics are made up on the spot.
On the spot.
Absolutely.
Or in the MVA, as we say.
Exactly.
In the business.
So here's our converter. If you remember, it was bound to the count property of the collection. So this is going to be an int that comes in.
So you're safe to convert it because you know what you're going to use this for.
Yeah, so value is int. If it isn't, it's going to skip back and we're just going to say visible anyway. Then we're going to do a quick check. If the value is greater than 0, then we're going to hide our empty template. Otherwise, we're going to show it. So if we quickly flick back, we can see we've added this in, and let's run the application quickly.
Okay.
And so now what we're going to see is our header will appear. So we have customer 0.
Now wait, there are 3 objects there. To be clear, all 3 are in the header. The
Are
list
all in
is
the
still
header.
below.
Because we declared our header inside a stack panel
Okay.
that contains all of these elements. And then we have this no records loaded. So that obviously this is not the best styled approach, so you probably wouldn't.
Because you don't want black text? Is that the...
That's it, yeah, that's it. But this gives you a great way of communicating that there is no records loaded in a particular list. It gives you a good empty template. And of course, you can do something much richer than this. You can put graphics in, you can display multiple lines of text, and so on and so forth. So this is, I think it's pretty good guidance in actual fact. And it wasn't something that had really occurred to me before we started working on this, that this would be a great way to inject something in when you had this empty list.
Well, and we saw what the list looks like when there's no data in it.
Yes.
There's no hint at all to the user of what's actually happening. So giving them that sort of kind of, you know your own data too, right? You may not say no data loaded. You may actually say loading ... because you know that you'll call it automatically.
You've got an asynchronous operation that's running that's going to load this behind the scenes and so on and so forth.
That's right.
Great point.
So that's the header at the top of the list. What, I suppose we could put something at the bottom of the list?
We absolutely can. And strangely enough,
it's called the bottom.
No, the footer.
Footer.
Fail. Bring back the monkey. So we have another data template here.
All right.
Which is the footer template. And so we actually have content commented out right now. And so we're doing something interesting here, because one of the other scenarios that we often encounter with this data is sometimes we have an awful lot of data, but we want to be responsive to the user and bring back interactivity very, very quickly. And so we might want to just load a small portion of the data, perhaps certainly say, for example, it's a current news application.
Right.
Our list is going to show the most recent articles.
The first 20, maybe.
Exactly. And so we're going to bring that back. If the user wants to browse more articles, maybe they want to hit another button, say, go and retrieve more. So this is an example of where we can use the footer template to put some interactive elements in here that will actually load more information.
Interesting. All right. So I see it's a button that says load more. Okay.
Yeah. And we have an event in our code behind that is on load more. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to generate 10 more customers, and we're going to add it into our customers collection.
All right, so this is dummy data, but obviously we'd call out to a service and get news items. You wouldn't have dummy news items.
Absolutely, and obviously in a production environment, you'd be building this in an asynchronous fashion.
Oh, that's for sure.
So you didn't tie things up on your UI and so on. But let's quickly run this. And what we should now see is we have, this is our header down to the bottom of this tastefully colored no records loaded label.
And then there's all your data.
There's all the data.
Squeezed into 0 pixels.
And then we have load more, which is the footer. So if we click on load more, we now get...
2 things changed.
2 things happen.
We get a bunch of data.
3 things happen, actually. Customers count gets increment.
Oh, very nice. Yes.
The empty data template disappears.
That's because it reevaluated because count changed.
Yep. We got some gratuitous animation when these elements loaded.
Yeah, that's nice. And we call that the Darren signature.
Exactly. I nearly formed a company called Gratuity. Just for this. And so here's our elements that we've loaded. This has also pushed the load more down. If I click this again, we load more data in, and we can see how our scroll bar is now showing that there's more data. Interestingly, as we scroll, our header moves off.
Oh, this is like infinite scrolling almost.
Absolutely. So I can keep adding more data. It keeps increasing the size, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So all of this will work. Here's the clear all button that I added.
Just so
now
we
if I
can test
hit
it more.
Exactly. Now I can switch back and no records. So we can instantly see that this is working.
Yeah, that's very cool. What a simple little demo and a nice way to use the header and the footer to get this sort of interaction. Now we're making a few assumptions here. For one, we're using a list view that's in a vertical stack panel. So we know that everything lines up properly. If you're using other types, you'll have to come up with a different type of solution. But this, for a typical list view, which is certainly now becoming the most common list object or the items control that you're using in Windows 10. So I recommend you style it differently, but think about the concept for sure. It's really
exactly. I mean, I'm actually using an item stack panel here that was set to vertical, so I'm going to switch that to horizontal so we can see that the assumption and the styling starts to break down when we switch these things around. So here we have our header and our footer, and so this doesn't really work very well. Certainly if I hit load more, then we start to see things shooting off the screen and so on and so forth. So absolutely you want to really think about how you're going to use this.
So what you're saying is you want to debug it once before you ship it. So you know that
at least once.
All right, well, lesson learned, huh? I
Yeah.
never thought about that till you said it.
So here's one of the other things that we can play around with here. Because we've got these templates for our items panel template,
Okay.
we can also change the transitions we're using. And, you know, as you say, it wouldn't be one of my demos if there wasn't some gratuitous animation.
So children transitions is a property on a panel. And so
Yes.
you're putting this on the item stack panel that's set inside the items panel template. So that's where this belongs. All right.
If I run this, now we get that cascading action.
That was
as
pretty,
this is
actually.
loading.
That was very nice. Yeah, we have, that's beautiful.
It is. It is.
I liked it better the first time.
I liked it better the first time when it worked. Yeah. It's very interesting how the sometimes I've noticed this with the transitions, and I assume it's something has occurred that means the acceleration isn't available.
Yeah, I bet that's right.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right.
Okay.
Show me more. We've seen the footer. We've seen the child transitions. We've changed orientation. What about
Jumping back to the slides. And
jumping back to the slides so we can review? How about that?
Exactly. Sounds like a good plan. I know where you were going, and we'll be there soon. Okay. So let's just recap. You know, we talked about items template, and we've covered that in other areas in the module. The key thing about this is how an individual item inside our list control will be shown. So we have this very simply, that it's just showing the display name, which is concatenated last name, comma, first name. Obviously, if you've got richer data, you can show a lot more things in here. You know, there's times where you might have checkboxes and so on, indicating that certain data is in a certain status. You can color things and so on. The world is your limit, really. In terms
You didn't
of what
say
you can
oyster.
do.
That was nice.
Yeah.
I guess I did.
I guess you did. That wasn't so nice.
Yeah.
Look at you leaning into the screen. Where are you going?
XAML for Windows.
Yep.
What version, though? What version of Windows is it for?
The key thing that we're bringing to your attention in this particular data template is the use of the X data type, so that we can still use XBind within a data type, data template even.
Right. Just to toss into that, as long as it's in the resources of the page and not in a resource dictionary.
Yes, once you're too abstracted away.
Right, there's an extra step. You have to introduce X class if you put it into a resource dictionary.
Yes, indeed. So, what is a header template? Well, pretty much as the name says, it is the header that's going to appear on your list. It is within the list, which is sometimes surprising in that if you scroll your list, the header will scroll off. The same with the footer. The footer will scroll into view, but will be off the view if there isn't enough room to display it in the current UI layout. One of the interesting things we're just showing in this particular scenario is how you can use binding within a text block using the run.
Yes.
So we can have static text as in the customer's colon space, and then we have this binding that brings in the number value.
That's right.
So you can do some very rich things. Here is where we introduce the header as an empty list template concept, that we have this area that is the background that comes in and is displayed when the visibility converter detects that we have 0 elements in there.
Yeah, very nice. And this is that converter, right?
This is that converter.
In that integer,
Yep.
checks first to see that it is the integer. Then if it is greater than 0, returns collapsed.
That's it.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. Little ternary operator that seems nice and simplistic. This, by the way, you see as a way of extending binding all the time.
Yes.
And also one of the, could be, obviously you're only going to use it once, so it's not an issue. But if you use it in a repeated item, can be a performance kind of hit.
Yeah, and I actually find I'm using them more often with XBind. And that's because of the strongly typed nature of some of the properties that you might have in your view model a Boolean value, whereas in the XAML controls, they're actually a nullable bool. And so you sometimes have to leverage a converter to be able to manage that transition backwards and forwards.
Right, like is checked with a checkbox.
Yeah, because that is your indeterminate state, is if it's null.
It's not true, false. There's 3 positions, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, well, I like all that. I like all of that. Let's take a look at the footer. I think that was the one other thing that you had going on there.
There was, and again, you could do all manner of different things in here. We chose to put some interactive content in there, the button that we leverage to load more. It may or may not be suitable for the scenarios you have in mind with your controls and your list data, but it just gives you an example that you're not stuck with just showing text saying this is the bottom.
Yeah, that's right. Do you remember in the previous module we had for this course, we were talking about alternating color, and that was just changing the way that each item was styled, kind of depending on the logic that we introduced.
Yep.
And that's one thing you can do, but we can also change dramatic things as well, and that's with the template selector.
Yes.
And I think that's worth showing off because it's a really valuable piece, especially if you're mixing data types.
Absolutely. So that brings us nicely into template selectors.
Oh, well, that's
It's
a
almost as
surprise.
if you saw the deck.
I didn't realize that that was next.
So what is a template selector? Well, it derives from a data template selector class. You can effectively use code to choose which template is to be applied. And so that's very useful. And you typically will create it as a resource within your application and use it in multiple places. Let's just go ahead and show it, shall we?
Darren, will you go ahead and show it?
I think so.
Let's open up Visual Studio, Hey, Cortana.
Yeah, hang on.
Open up Visual Studio.
And here we are. So what we want to do is we want to show how we can leverage the template selector in this particular scenario. So here is an area of commented out code where I have the template selector already prepared. If I uncomment this.
We're up in the resources, okay.
Yep. So what we have here is a data template that's defined for an alternate item template. And we have our template selector resource. So we've got contains string template selector. We've got a key of the first letter template selector. And we have a reference to our existing item template that's declared further up in the resources that we were using previously.
Yep.
We also have our alternate item data template, which is this one that we've just defined here.
Just uncommented that one, okay.
Which has a background of yellow. And we also have another property, search string equals JO.
Joe, we're looking for Joe.
We're looking for Joe. So what I'm going to do is comment out this existing list view and uncomment this one because I wanted to save myself the whole time of this typing one particular line.
Well, I know that in the long run, it has saved us a lot of time.
It has, yeah. It's almost foreshadowing. So let's take a quick look at this. What we have in here is we have an item template selector. And one of the key things is we don't actually have an item template defined anywhere. So all of this selection is delegated to this resource. So let's have a look at this. So if we jump into contain string template selector, what we see is, again, this is a very simple class. And it's very reminiscent of the style selector that we developed as part of the earlier module. So we've implemented, or inherited from, I should say, data template selector. We've created our three simple properties for item data template of type data template, alternate item data template of type data template, and our search string, which funnily enough is a string.
Got it.
So very similar to our style selector, we have an override of select template core this time as opposed to select style core.
Yeah.
And we're returning type data template, which makes an awful lot of sense. We pass in the item.
Or we receive.
We receive. It's a repetition. It's a wonderful thing. So the item is the data element that we're going to be displaying.
You're writing this yourself. You know the context. You know you can cast it.
Yep. So I'm casting it to a customer, though I am still doing a null check. Because it's our customer object, and if you recall, we have a first name, last name, and then a composite property.
Yes.
That is the display name. So we're checking the display name string to see if it has an index of the search string, which was JO that we passed in.
Sure.
Because we may not necessarily be comparing to uppercase all of the time, we're using a string comparison enumeration that we can select ordinal, ignore case. So the ignore case is pretty self-evident.
Yeah, what's that ordinal part?
The ordinal says don't worry about locale. So use a generic locale for this check.
Very nice.
Index of will return a value equal to 0 or higher if it finds an instance of the JO string in our supplied item.
So that gets the special data template, or
which is the alternate item data template. Otherwise, it returns the regular.
Okay. So now every time Joe is found in the display name, you get the special data template which has that yellow color.
Exactly. So let's run up our template. So we've got no data in. If we load, here are
Joel and Johnson, Jose.
And Jordan.
Impressive.
So,
oh, that's very cool. So it's a similar effect to what we had with style.
Yes.
But of course, it gives us, we could even introduce new controls or anything else because this is a full-fledged template.
Absolutely. We can have a completely different experience for these things. We're using it right now as something that's somewhat illustrative of perhaps a search. One of the key things, obviously, is we would need to update the layout if we were dynamically changing these templates using a template selector.
Making them larger, you mean? Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've been talking about templates, the header template, the footer template, the item template, the panel template, and all of the ways you might even select those based on the logic inside your application, all rolled up inside the items control, where you see things like the list view or the grid view implementing those. We talked about how to do all of the elaborate parts of it, like semantic zoom in the previous module, where you can take these, repeat the data, and show it inside your application in a really beautiful way and in a really simple way by declaring them through XAML. Most of these controls, you get most of it out of the box for free, and you can extend it to make it look exactly the way you need to give that signature experience. Signature experience. Make it absolutely beautiful. This is the last of all the modules in this course, but we have several others to teach you advanced techniques inside XAML. This is XAML for Windows 10. Good job, Darren.
Good job, Jerry.
And?
Live long and prosper.
We'll see you all again.